So another Patreon Q&A. Thank you again, Patreons, so much for your support. And thank you again, Pethset, Kaitomic, and Flag for donating your commercial collections to the monthly giveaways we do on Discord. If you're a Patreon, come join us on Discord for, again, monthly giveaways and a lovely community. If you are not a Patreon, consider joining our community on Patreon and Discord. Let's start with the Q&A. So the first question is coming from Richard. Could you please give some advice on how to record eurorack audio through an ES9 with my DAW, which is Bitwig, preventing clipping? Suggestions for any dynamic processing control in eurorack to tame, control, and color the signal. So this is not my system. I have 7 UKs, but these are the modules that I have, and I ran a few times into issues with gain staging. And what I mean by that is basically going from one module to another, and the modules are too hot and they will clip inside the case. So I never had issues. Let me maybe zoom in a bit. I never had issues with the ES9 clipping. I'm not so sure why it happens to you. I never had this issue because the ES9 is it's dedicated to take eurorack signals and take them down to reasonable levels for your DAW, for Bitwig. But I did run into issues in the gain staging stage, basically. So maybe this is the issue you have. For example, what happens to me, or what happened to me a lot, is I send the Basimilus into the mimeophone, and the Basimilus for some reason is really loud and really hot and really strong signal, and always the mimeophone would clip. Now I know the mimeophone has a built-in level control that you can control the incoming level or the signal, the level of the incoming signal, but it never helped, and I always had to went through some sort of attenuation. The module I use the most for this is the Quadrat from IntelliGel. I will just send signals there and then I will attenuate them. It's an attenuator. An attenuator will attenuate signals, attenuate volume. So this is more or less what I usually do. The same with a guillotine, which is a distortion. It has no level control. It has just gain, which will up the distortion basically. So usually after that, I will also go through some sort of attenuation. In my case, I usually send it to a filter. If it's Ikari, for example, it has an input gain, which is quite important. So I can control the levels. Also, Waves has an input gain. Also, Sarajevo, the delay has an input level. The filter from AJH has input levels. I have the ST mix that I can use if I have a stereo signals to attenuate things. The X-Pen is great for something like this. The Fuser from Volt, which is also a mixer. Planer can also do something like this, although it's a bit less dedicated for this. Ghost has input and output gain. Reduxer and LED Rover also have incoming gain and also overall volume. So you have to watch out to have a look at your chain. Also the STO, by the way, is quite loud usually. So also I will have to tame, especially if I go to something like a VCA, for example, which I have here, the Vinca. Also here I can control the maximum level it will go to. Also Kruin has a level control, which is also quite handy. So you have to look at your chain and have a look. Maybe something inside the chain is already clipping, like I mentioned. With the mimeophone, I had some issues. I had to send signals first into an attenuator and then into the mimeophone. Morphogene the same. So maybe somewhere along the chain, if you have digital, some sorts of digital modules, usually it will happen with them. You will get some sort of distortion because it will clip. So you have to see if maybe it happens already inside the chain. Again, I never had this with the ES9. That the signal was too hot, so it clipped. In Bitwig, usually what I will do, I will use the tool or the tool module or the tool device, and I will take the gain down. The gain is basically the incoming volume. So before I send it into a delay, before I send it into a reverb, before I do anything, I will first of all take it down so it's easier to work with if it's too hot. But usually I don't really experience any issues. But my suggestion, my advice is, go step by step in your chain and see maybe something is clipping already inside of the chain. This is what's called gain staging. In every stage of your chain, have a look, maybe one signal is too hot and it's causing this issue. The next one is coming from Nick. Hi, Nick. I'm thinking of adding a NerdSeq to my setup to help bring in some structure to my patching. I know it's very precise sequencer, but was wondering if you've been using its random features or pairing its structures with more generative techniques. So yes and no. So I got a NerdSeq originally because I wanted to perform live, and I thought it would be a great tool to save my ideas, to save my compositions so I can have them live. First of all, yes, it's an amazing tool to have compositions and to perform them live. I didn't think it's so... it sounds like I'm going to say something negative, but actually it's going to be positive. I didn't think... So my expectations were not so high. They were high, but not so high, and the NerdSeq definitely exceeded my expectations. It's amazing. It's a great sequencer. I was a bit afraid that it would be like more of a tracker. I mean, it is a tracker, but it's very user-friendly. There are some differences. The main one is just it's running down instead of left to right. It's after 2 seconds, you get used to it. I don't have any experience with trackers, and still it's an amazing tool. I use it now all the time, and it's great for composing, and as you say, for more precise patches or patching and stuff like this, and adding structure. I didn't experiment with its random features, maybe with probability a bit, but I think that's it. Just with the probabilities, there's also probability for the effects, which is quite amazing. But I met the developer recently at a modular meeting in Holland, in Utrecht, and I spoke with him a bit, and he showed me something that will be released soon, I hope. It's also on YouTube. You can also see it on YouTube. He's speaking about this update for a few months, and he's going to add sort of a quantizer so you can quantize signals or pitch information. You can choose your own scales. Of course, you can also modulate things, I believe. And then if you combine this with the probability and combine this with the randomness of the NerdSeq, I think you can get really interesting generative results, because then you have things kept more or less musical, if that's a word. And again, I believe that you can also modulate things and change the quantizer and stuff like this. It can be quite interesting. So this is already something to look forward to. And I did use it also. So I had like patches that were running. You can see it also on YouTube if you look at the Modular Fun Guy channel. The experiments I did, for example, with the Ikari filter, or with the Sarajevo delay. So what I did, I had patches running sometimes randomly, sometimes so more or less generative, and then I added structure to them with the NerdSeq, if it's a baseline, if it's a sequence that I can then switch between. So it can work really nicely also in a generative context. And again, I believe that after the update that hopefully will come soon, where you can have also a quantizer, and of course it's the NerdSeq, you can do all sorts of crazy things with it. I think it can really work well also for more generative techniques. The next question is coming from Specky, I believe. What is my take on synthesizing a Joe harp? So I think the best approach is to go in the direction of carpless strong. And what I mean by that, I have here a burst of noise. So I have white noise going through a bandpass filter, which will allow you also to change the timbre, a VCA in a very short envelope, right? To create this burst of noise, and then you will need some sort of a resonator. You can use a delay, you can build your own delay if you want, but there are some modules that are dedicated for carpless strong. There are delay modules that are dedicated for it, and then you can also control the pitch, like Wallenda, for example, from Studio 6+1, of course, available for free. So if I send this burst of noise through Wallenda first, get a feedback all the way up, and then you can tune it. You get this sort of string sound, but it sounds in higher pitches. It sounds more or less like the sound you're after. And again, you can change the bandpass also. Right, to get this variation in timbre. And what's left is the vowels that you can create with your mouth. And for this, you can use a formants filter, something like the one from Squinky Labs, with some modulation that I have here. Right, so of course you can experiment with this quite a lot and get just the sound you want, but I think this is a good place to start with. Sharp strong, a burst of noise going through a short delay with high feedback, and these are some modules that you can use, for example, a bandpass filter to change the timbre, Wallenda, so you can have also control of pitch information, and formants to get this formant effect that you can create with your mouth. The next one is coming from Roberto. It would be great to see how we can use VCV as a component of a band in an organic way and not as rigid as a computer would be. Is there a way to let the patch interact with human playing and dynamics and so on? So yes, there are a few tricks and modules that you can use, primarily an envelope follower. I think it's worth it to try and play the modular. I mean, okay, if you have a sequence or something, then maybe the other bandmates will have to sit with the sequence. But if you want intensity, you can use filters to bring voices in and out. You can use distortion. You can add and remove voices. But I think what I'm trying to say is I think if you want it to be more human, I guess the best would be to play the synthesizer, to play VCV rack, get yourself a MIDI controller. It's definitely worth it. Get yourself a MIDI controller and try and control different parameters, maybe create sorts of macro controllers with something like Patchmaster, and try to find ways according to the patch that you have. It will be different with each and every patch and with each and every band also, and different music types and so on. Try and find ways that you can manually with your hands add and remove intensity, change dynamics and so on. It's possible to do, and it's a fun process to discover also. Again, you can use distortion, you can use filters, you can add and remove layers. Don't forget you have a whole orchestra here in VCV rack that you can use to add and remove intensity. But again, there are some tricks that you can use to have VCV rack interact with the outside world, primarily using an envelope follower. So here I have drums. It's a sample, but of course this can be also live drums, this can be guitar, this can be all sorts of different things. Right, but these are the drums. Maybe I will make this a bit louder. Right, and you can see I have here an envelope follower that will basically follow the amplitude envelope of these drums. It will follow it and it will output CV accordingly. Right, so you can actually see the bumps here of the drums. Right, so already you get a signal that is interacting with the incoming drums. Now, if you use something like a comparator, you can extract also gates from it. Right, you can see that the levels here, if I up the gain a bit, you can see the level here changes. By using a comparator, you can tell the comparator when you want it to output a gate. For example, whenever it crosses, in this case, 0.6, let's say it's somewhere here. Right, whenever the volume of the drums, so from the envelope follower, crosses this point, a gate will come out. Right, so whenever the drums are loud, whenever the drums are actually playing, it will output a gate, and then you can convert the audio from the drums into a gate. If you have E-drums or some sort of other, something that can send MIDI, it's even easier. Right, but now I'm using these gates to drive a sequencer that will play a voice, basically. If I take the delay down for a second. right? With each hit, right, you get basically a new note. Now, if you have drums that with multiple microphones, and you can, for example, take just one sound, just the kick drum, for example. If you can take just the audio of the kick drum and send it into VCAs, you can use just the kick drum sound to drive basically your sequences and your voices, right? So according to how the drummer plays, according to the drummer rhythm, voices in VCAs will move. Let me add the delay, and of course, this can be any other instrument. This can be a piano, this can be a guitar, this can be a ukulele, a bass, upright bass. It can be all sorts of different things. And if you have access just to this audio, you can also use it specifically, for example, if it's drums, just the kick drum, or just a snare, or just the hi-hat. You can use the hi-hat to drive another sequencer. Right, so really with an envelope follower and a comparator, you can do a lot. And of course, you can use this also for modulation. Right, so here I'm using the follower to open a filter. Right, so again, according to how the drummer will play, things in your patch will move differently in different timings with different intensity. The louder he plays, the more intensity, the softer, the less intensity, and so on. So again, I think you should experiment with playing also some aspects by yourself, just as another band member, but explore also using an envelope follower if you can send signals inside VCAs and a comparator and see the results. In any case, if you do this and you experiment with this and you get results, please share them with us. It would be interesting to see how it works. The next one is from Manusef, I guess. What will be your approach to add random ghost notes to a melodic sequence or drum pattern? Is there a simple way to do this? So there are two approaches you can take. Maybe a few examples. The first one is to use multiple sequencers, and of course you can have also sequencers that have some sort of probability, or to add them some sort of randomness in a way, or to use something like sample and hold instead of a second sequencer. I use this technique, but not as often. I use a different technique that I will show you in a second. This is basically the result. I have here one step sequencer sequencing kick all. Right, and I have here another sequencer that will add these ghost notes every once in a while. Right, and basically I'm using this sequencer to control the decay and the timbre of the kick all. Right, so according to this second sequencer, right, you heard it to the dip. I can change when the ghost notes will happen. Again, I am using this technique with another sequencer or with sample and hold, but what I like more is using a delay for ghost notes, and this you can do either randomly or you can do this with a sequencer. So here I have some drums. I have a kick drum, right, sequenced by the gate sec, of course, right, and then there is a snare. Right, that will usually play just one note. Let me close the modulation here, right? But then every once in a while it will get also ghost notes with a delay. So what I do is I modulate the mix of the delay, and I set the delay time to the rate of the ghost notes that I want. Right, so if I bring in the modulation, right, so every once in a while we will get also ghost notes, and what I'm doing here, I'm using chances to add probability to the gates of the snare, right, and then I control the length of these gates with the gate module, and this basically I use as modulation for the mix. So sometimes, according to the probability on chances, sometimes there will be ghost notes and sometimes not. Right, I'm doing here also with hi-hat something different. In this case, instead of something random, I have this with the sequencer, again modulating the mix of the delay. Right, and then there is also a rim shot right? Also with some sort of ghost notes, right? And again, instead of using a sequencer, you can use the same setup I use here with chances, and use chances to bring in and out the modulation or the delay actually, and like this add ghost notes. So again, you can use multiple sequences or sequencers or sample and hold or something random and combine them into one voice. I use this less because I like using the delay. It's always interesting. And it sounds sometimes like ratcheting, sometimes like ghost notes, depends on the level of the mix, right? And so on and so forth. So this is definitely something you can experiment with. So the next one is coming from Roger. What's the easiest way to reliable clock dividers that work seamlessly with other modules, like having a master clock at 137 BPM, and then quarter, eighth, 16, 32nd node divisions with even the ability to then pass that onto prime numbers, polyrhythmic clocks, and then attach that to gate and sequencer. So I'm not so sure what you mean with reliable clock dividers, and I'm pretty sure you mean clock multipliers because you want 16th notes, 32nd notes, and so on. So again, I'm not so sure what you mean with reliable clock dividers, but I had no issues at all with clocked from Impromptu. If you're in VCAs, of course, you can use even multiple of them. As you can see, I have here one set to 137. Multiplied by 2 is basically 8th notes. Multiplied by 3, you will get triplets. Multiplied by 4, 16th notes. Then you can start with polyrhythms, right? You can also divide if you want, right? You divide by 1.5 for triplets, by 2.5, 3, 4, 5, and get all sorts of polyrhythms with clock divisions. And again, you can use as many as you want. And there's a really easy way to chain them. For one that you want to use as your master clock, you right click, there is auto patch, then you choose make this the master, and then on the other ones you right click, auto patch, and connect, right? And it will directly connect them and they will be in sync. 137, right? Connect to master, and you can use as many as you want. Just don't forget that after you connect them, just hit reset once or one and stop them, so they will all again be in sync. And then you have as many multiplications and divisions as you want, and it's very reliable from my experience. And you can use this to sequence, to drive sequencers, to drive voices, and so on and so forth. The next question is from Marcus. I notice you often use filters or VCAs to bring parts of voices in and out of your own compositions. How much of this do you compose exactly versus improvise more loosely? Do you use any visual feedback from the rack or your hardware when you are performing like this? Or is it all in your head ears? Do you even start with tactile controls and then finally sequence the progress as you find what you want to do more precisely, or vice versa? So first of all, about filters and VCAs, I do use filters a lot to bring voices in and out. And that's mainly because filters will not only control the volume to bring the voices in and out, but they will also control the timbre, which means that softer notes will be also darker and louder notes will be brighter. And this can give space to other voices. If I take one voice down just with volume, it's still very much there in the frequency spectrum, and this gives less space to other voices. If I use a filter, when I start closing, a low pass filter, of course, when I start closing the filter, it will be also darker and it will give other voices much more space. This is what I prefer. This is what I've done for years now. And I just love it. I love filters. I love using them. I love using them as a dynamic control, also to control the dynamics of the composition. Now, how much of it is composed exactly and how much of it is improvised? So first of all, I'm not so sure what is the definition of improvisation. So what does it mean so where is the line between improvisation and not improvisation? But never mind. Let's say so what I will do, or I will try not to do actually, is after I compose the piece, I will try not to play it or not to rehearse it or not to practice it too much. I would like to leave space for improvisation during the performance. For me, it's all about the performance. It's all, and while I perform it, I also record it. So it's all about the performance. I will leave space for myself to improvise during the performance. For example, I have one example that I just recorded something. It's already uploaded. Again, if you are interested, go follow the Modular Fun Guy channel. This is just for my music, with hardware mostly. So I recorded something, and while I recorded it, while I performed it, I felt like there is one sequence that should be played again and again. At the beginning it was, and at the end. And it's something I didn't rehearse. It's something I didn't think about while composing. It's something that happened during the performance and during the recording, and it's there in the recording also. You can see me also at the end triggering this sequence again and again, because when I performed it, I felt like I want this to repeat itself and will not move to the next sequence. So this is, for example, something that was improvised on the spot. About the filters, so again, I will try. So this is also related to your question. Do you start with tactile controls and then finally sequence the progress? So this is also something that I leave for the performance. So when I compose, I will think more of the notes. So recently I got the NerdSeq. We spoke about it also before, and there I can really compose, and I can really create sequences and compositions and notes and stuff like this and progressions. So what I will do, I will do this first. I will compose, and then I will try to think, how can I perform this composition? And that's it. And I will not try to think, okay, after 1 minute I will bring this voice, and no, I will think, okay, how I want this to flow. What voices I want first, what voices I want last, what voices are more important for me, for the feeling, for the music, and then I will go and perform it, and I will sort of improvise when to bring them, how slowly, how quickly. The intensity will happen during the performance. Again, for me, it's all about the performance. So I leave space for me to actually surprise myself, or let the music surprise me, I guess, while I'm performing. Yes, so there is some sort of improvisation there, but the sequences, recently at least, the composition itself is there already. But I perform it live. If it's switching between the sequences, like I mentioned before, if it's bringing the voices in and out, this is all sort of happens in the moment. You can see me also, I close my eyes and I just follow the sound and follow the music and what feels right in that moment. All while thinking about the composition, what it meant for me, what it's about in my head, at least in my feeling, what do I feel? And every time that I perform it, it will sound slightly different, not totally different, because the composition, the notes are still more or less the same, but it will be slightly different because I will play differently, because it's a different time, because I feel different, and so on and so forth. About visual feedback, so again, other than the NerdSeq where I can see the sequences, there is no really visual feedback in hardware, and that's why you see me also, I just shut my eyes and I go with the flow, because there is no visual. I mean, everything is visual. With hardware, everything is there, because I look at the filter, I see exactly where it is. I don't even have to think about this, and I just reach, and everything is very visual there. But something specific I don't have. In VCAs, it's not a problem, but it is something that I pay attention to. And what I will do recently, since Patchmaster is available, I will create a sort of a Patchmaster setup for the things that I want to perform. And then I have it in front of me in the screen, and then I know more or less what controls I have. So yes, I do use filters all the time. There is some aspect of improvisation, because I try not to practice, not to rehearse the piece too much, so I can leave myself space for being in the moment. I don't really have any special visual feedbacks in hardware. And yes, usually I will start from the composition, and then later I will think about more or less about the voices, how and how I want the intensity, more or less the flow, the arc, and so on, and then I will perform. It's all about the performance, and see how it goes. The next question is coming from Alex. Been watching your secondary channel Modular Fun Guy. Thank you so much. And found that you didn't seem to have a lot of VCAs. I would like to know your go-to modules except for the guillotine distortion, which everyone know you love, and have an update on your recent track additions like the NerdSeq, which I also bought this summer. Great. Thanks for the great content. Really enjoyed your hardware take on modular. Thank you so much. Yeah, so I for in the last years, I did every year like an update video, another year into eurorack. And this year I didn't do one because I took a break from hardware a few months. I didn't do anything with my modular. I just took a break from it from a bit. Now I'm back and I'm back composing, and you are all invited to the Modular Fun Guy channel if you want to explore it a bit. It's just music with hardware mostly. Yes, so I will make another video. I don't know if it will happen this year. Maybe this year. I mean, it's already October, but we'll see. Maybe I will just make something about the break and why I took a break and what happened during this break. And then next year I can make another one. Or I will just keep everything for next year for the video about next year, because I do want to make another one. There are some things changed. But let's go back to this, to this setup here. Again, I don't have a case this big anymore. I have a 7U case and I just switched the modules. So these are the modules that I have. So let's go. I want to show you, or we can just go together and see for a second. I wanted to show you about the VCAs first of all. So yes, I don't have many VCAs. In fact, I have just one. I have just Vinca. But there is a lot of VCA functionality already in the modules. So for example, if you look, Cruin from Instruo has a built-in VCA, which is already interesting. Waves and Ikari, the Waves filter and Ikari filters, they both have built-in VCAs. If I use the oscillators on data, also it has built-in VCAs, although I don't use it too often. Xpen is a VCA that I have, or it can be a VCA. Freak, the filter from Volt, has a built-in VCA. Microcell has a built-in VCA. Planar 2 I can use as a VCA. Ghost has a built-in VCA for the input and for the output. And Cascades that I got recently has also amplitude modulation, which is basically also I can use it as a VCA because I can mix things. And let me show you this in a second. Already I will mention, I just got Cascade a few weeks ago, or a few, whatever, days ago, depends when you watch it. And because I needed another voice, another oscillator, I sold a few things, but I needed another oscillator, and I got this one. And it's great. Wow, it's really interesting. It's from After Later Audio. It's a really interesting oscillator, or voice if you want to call it. No, it's an oscillator with all sorts of wave shapes and built-in amplitude modulation, where you have access to the modulation input and the carrier also, to the modulator and carrier, which is quite interesting. It gets pretty hot. I'm not so sure. Maybe my unit is weird or something, but it's really hot. I have the feeling that it's really making my case really burn up after a while. But it works really nicely, and I can mix all sorts of waves here, right? It has many options here, and then bring them back into the carrier, and then with the modulator I can use as a VCA, because again, it's amplitude modulation. VCA is all about amplitude modulation. So again, I don't have many dedicated VCAs. Again, I have just one, but I do have VCA functionality when needed. So I can use, so I can work around this. A few modules, again, I will make the video eventually and I will show more or less what changed. But a few modules other than the lovely guillotine that I use all the time, that I use a lot. Neoni I use a lot. Cruin I use a lot. So what I will do is send Cruin through Ikari, and this is my base. The Ikari filter I got also a few months ago, or just before I took the break, maybe, I'm not so sure anymore, but is such a good filter, such a lovely filter, stereo filter, again with the built-in VCA also, and all sorts of stereo modulations and lots of gain. It works really nicely with Coin. So Neoni and Coin I use all the time. Ikari I use a lot. Nox I like. I have 2 Nox, knock that I can use. What else do I use a lot? Recently I took some stuff out of the case also. So for example, the Morphogene is out of the case, the Mimeophone. I'm just trying to refresh things a bit. And I work also, since I got the NerdSeq, I also found myself, I work also in a different way. There was a fly here. In a different way, more like I did on the piano, more structured, I guess. So I just wanted to refresh some things. The STO I use also as a voice. So I have 4 voices now. I have Neoni, Cruin, STO, and Cascades, which is the oscillator from Afterlater Audio. So I have 4 voices that I can use and compose with, or 4 dedicated voices, let's say, because I can use other things as voices as well. The X-Pen I use all the time. It's great for mixing voices or mixing waves. I do this with Neoni and the Cascades. I will send some waves, and you can also modulate the panning or crossfade between the really great sound design tool. Other stuff that I will use all the time. Recently, the Vork filter is there. The Freak filter is there. Voltage block is still there all the time. I use it always. What else? The NerdSeq and the Cascades. Yeah, that's it, more or less. These are the highlights from recent weeks that I started again composing, what I use a lot. And yes, I will make the video. It will come eventually. And yes, that's it. So the last question is coming from Vladi. Could you give us a good example of using Befaco's Noise Plethora to create noisy drone textures? It looks very powerful tool, but I don't know how to couple it properly with oscillators and the rest. Thank you. All right. There are a few things you can try. Here I have a basic drone sound, right? I have the modern VCO going through, or 2 modern VCOs going through a mixer and a filter, and there's some movement with the quad LFO. Right, a very basic drone. So the first thing what you can do is use Noise Plethora as another layer, as a noisy layer. Here I'm using my favorite algorithm, which is Program A Textures, the last one, Bazurilla, I guess, which is A9 basically. And I'm going to send this as another layer, as another sound source to the mixer. Right, if I solo this, it will sound like this. There is some modulation here, you can hear the movement. Right, so first of all what you can do is add this as another layer. Right, already it's quite noisy. And it has texture to it because this noise is not just white noise, it's moving, it has variation and so on. The next thing what you can do is use noise as a modulation source, and I love using it with filters to modulate the filter, but you can experiment and modulate all sorts of different things with the noise. So here I have another noise, it will sound like this basically. Right, quite harsh again with movement, but I'm going to use it as a modulation source to modulate the filter, and of course experiment also with different filters. This filter from Surge has a different modulation, a different way of modulating things. So try and experiment also with different filters, but here I'm just going to use it as a modulation source for the filter. Without, with. Right, so again it adds another layer of complexity to the sound, not as another layer as a sound source, but as a modulation source. Another thing you can do is add another layer with pinging a filter. So Noise Plethora has this gritty output that can also be sent to the filter, right? So it will sound like this basically. Right? Going through a bandpass filter. But if you use just a lower quantity, right, and send this to a filter, to a bandpass filter. Let me unmute this. this one. High resonance. Right? It's noisy. And it works great as another layer. And then another thing you can do, you can just take the white noise from Noise Plethora and use it as a tuned voice, I guess, through another bandpass filter, which I have here from Surge. Right, there is some panic modulation, high resonance. Right, and then you can tune it also to notes. If you right-click the frequency and you write, for example, C5, it will be tuned to C5 or C6, let's say, so it's a bit higher. Right, as another layer. Right, so let's see if I can take all of this without the modulation, without the extra layers. Let's see if this will work. Without modulation, without the noise layer. And let's compare this. Let's compare this, the two voices, right? So this is now the original or the noisy. Lots of texture. Right, again, another layer, modulation source, try to ping a filter with and again, experiment with all sorts of filters. You can use multiple filters also with a gritty output. And also you can use it as a tuned noise source by using a bandpass filter with lots of resonance, and you can tune then the filter to the note that you want. And that's it. Again, thank you, Patreon, so much for your support, so much for your questions. Thank you again, Pethset, Kaitomic, and Flag, for donating your collections to the giveaways. Again, if you are a Patreon, come join us on Discord. If you are not a Patreon, consider joining our community on Patreon and Discord. Thank you for watching. Cheers.